So, welcome to Mini Masterclass Thursday. I am actually joining you live from Grapevine, Texas. And so I'm in a conference center, which unfortunately may have some background noise. I apologize in advance if that is at all intrusive into our conversation today, but hopefully not. We'll keep our fingers crossed. But what today's topic is that we'll be discussing is vetting a bookkeeper and an accounting professional for your business and what that looks like. One of the most common things that I see or hear about or get asked about when I'm out and about and traveling to different cities and states and getting to know people is, how come my bookkeeper didn't tell me what you're telling us now? How come no one's ever told us this before? How come my bookkeeper doesn't even know this if you're telling me this is something that should be status quo? And the real answer is there are, like every profession, are all levels and all skill sets of being an accounting professional. Not every accounting professional is meant to do every single person's books. And unfortunately, or taxes for that matter. And unfortunately, you most of the time don't get to know this information until it's most likely too late, or that you've experienced something where you've come to realize it's not a good fit. And that is really, really based on the fact that you don't know what you don't know, and that you don't know what questions to ask when you're vetting them, and you hire somebody on the basis of them saying, yes, I can do this, or yes, I know how to do this. And you trust them and believe them, and then you move on with your engagement. So today we're going to talk about some things that are bottom line basic ideas that you can ask your next bookkeeper potential or accounting professional potential, and also breaking down some scopes of work so that you understand better what you're really asking for. Another thing that I find very often is that the expectation of what you're paying for versus what you think is supposed to happen is grossly misaligned with what reality is. And it is it's the fault of both parties. It's the fault of the party you're hiring by not being explicitly clear about what's covered, what they do, what they don't do, what's your responsibility, what's theirs. And it's the fault of yours by not knowing what questions to ask or not having clarified explicitly upfront what you're expecting from them. Again, that could be just a result of you don't know what you don't know. And your interpretation of what bookkeeping means or accounting means versus what really that means could be just different. And so here we go. All right. So first and foremost, when you're hiring a bookkeeper, you have to understand that you are hiring somebody if they're only doing bookkeeping. Okay. So not accounting, not tax planning, not strategy, not business consulting, not outsourced CFO services, but just bookkeeping. You are hiring them to enter data that's already happened. So it's a reactive position. You are charging your card, you are spending your money, you are writing out checks, you are sending invoices. They are then entering that data after it's already happened. And that is bookkeeping. That is them keeping the books, keeping the records of what is going on in your business. If you are asking somebody, needing somebody, or wanting somebody to do anything on your behalf and proactively, you are asking them to do accounting. These are two different engagements. Yes, they could be one in the same, where an accounting professional can do both bookkeeping and accounting. Yes, they can be two separate tasks where you can have a bookkeeper entering data and accounting professional actually doing the real-time information, proactive information for you. But 9 times out of 10, I would say that people are expecting that a bookkeeper is going to do all these things for them for a very minimal charge or all encompassed into a very minimal charge. That is not the case. And that is where usually a misalignment starts is, hey, I'm paying you to do this service. And now you're telling me that you're not going to do this, or you can't do this, or this isn't included. So just be very, very aware of what you're asking for. Bookkeeping is all reactive and accounting is proactive. Accounting also then takes in consideration that they're going to analyze the data and bring you analytics and information about your data. A bookkeeper doesn't do that. A bookkeeper just makes sure everything's correct, everything reconciles, everything's accurate, everything is entered and represented in your books. An accounting professional or accountant uses that information then to bring you data about your business, about your money, helps you strategize, helps you use the numbers that the bookkeeper is taking care of to make strategic business decisions. They then also may be skilled enough to do tax planning, tax strategy, or tax preparation. Doesn't necessarily mean all one person can do all of it. Sometimes they can, and that's great for you if you do have a person that's doing all of that, but you need to understand you're then paying for all those different levels of services, not just bookkeeping. If your accounting professional also then does your controller type work, your outsourced CFO type work, and or your tax planning and strategy, great. If not, those are different scopes for different types of accounting professionals. So how do you know you have somebody that can actually do the work that you need them to do? There's about 10 questions that you can ask pretty commonly. And there's not only 10, but these are the very generic common questions you can ask when you're interviewing a pro advisor, an accounting professional, a QuickBooks expert, an expert in whatever software that you say that you are using or that you are using. These are about the most 10 basic questions you can ask to make sure you know, or you can defer or think that they really know what they're doing. Before we get into that, I would suggest always that you might bring someone in to sit in on these types of conversations, that you might have an accounting professional say, hey, yeah, they really know what they're doing, or I wouldn't I wouldn't do that if I were you. In fact, one of my good friends in life is a mechanic, and he has said to me, Sam, if you ever buy a car, I'll be happy to look at that car before you buy it from the dealer to make sure that you have guidance and expertise in whether or not this is a sound vehicle to purchase. And that's exactly the same type of thing we're doing here. I may not be buying the car from him, but because he knows what he knows, he can tell me that this is a good deal or not a good deal. And so can an accounting professional for you to hire someone in-house. Most accounting professionals that I know are outsourced services. They don't sit in-house. They're not on staff. And so if you're not finding an outsourced solution that you're partnering with, you're looking to bring someone in on staff every day. That's when I would bring someone else on a third party in to really help you understand. But if you're following this guideline, you too will be able to understand, even if you don't know what the heck you're doing or talking about, if they do. First and foremost, what software do they specialize in? If you have someone that says, oh, I know all the softwares. I know Xero. I know QuickBooks. I know NetSuite. I know Zoho. I know FreshBooks. That's great, but it's kind of that old scenario of jack of all trades, master of none. Same idea. If someone is so busy learning all these softwares or using all the softwares, they really haven't settled down and figured out completely one software. That's a red flag because the one software that you do use, because you're not using all those, you're using one, you want someone that understands it inside out, upside down, and backwards, or has the skill set to at least know how to reach out and solve a problem when one arises, because software and technology will always cause us issues, period. And no matter which one they are, there's going to be issues, there's going to be glitches, there's going to be things that they, as your professional, should be able to manage, at least finding out what the problem is. So which software do they specialize in? If they don't have an answer to that immediately, or if they give you like the flowery answer that tells you that they know all the things because they think that's what's impressive, that's kind of a red flag, because you know then that they haven't really taken the time to study one particular, and hopefully your particular software that you're using. If they say, oh, I just use Excel, I track everything on Excel, I don't need an accounting software, do not engage. I'm just going to say it that plainly. Do not engage. There is no such thing as real books in an Excel spreadsheet or workbook. It cannot give you a balance sheet and profit and loss. It can give you pivot tables, it can give you formulas, it can give you projections, it can give you all kinds of fancy charts and graphs. It is not a financial statement. It is not an audit compliant financial statement. It is not something you can take to your bank and say, here's an Excel that my person gave me of all my entries. It's not going to help you in your business. And if you're serious and you're a real business owner, you want real financials. So if they say, oh, I don't need accounting software because I use Excel, do not engage, is what is probably the only right answer there. Next, we're going to talk about, what is your industry? What specifically do you sell, make, or do? And do they know that industry? You can ask them point blank. Do you understand construction? Do you understand design work? Do you understand retail? Do you understand restaurants? Have you worked in any of these? And what are a few of your clients that you have served? Now, there are definitely clients, not a client attorney, but client accounting professional privileges that you need to keep in mind. For example, I personally never say who my clients are to anyone when I'm out and about, because that is me then telling something about that business that they may not want to know. So they may not want known, I mean. But you can go to your clients and you can say, I have a prospective client asking me for referral. Can I give them your name? Can I give them your email address? Are you comfortable with that? And they're going to say, sure, I'd love to. Yeah, bring them on down. Or they're going to say, I really would rather not, because I don't need people talking about my business. And then and then they know that you've taken the time to ask that question and let them know that, you care and you're invested in what they want. And either way, it's a good thing. So first and foremost, if you want information from the potential accounting professional, they may need to reach out to their clients to give them that time and understand that their clients may not be comfortable with it, but you can then say, great. And then you can look into that business and you can see what that business's model is like. If they have a website, you can maybe even understand a little bit more about how they function. You can ask, do they use QuickBooks, or what do they use? You can even call that business and you can then say, I'm considering hiring so-and-so. Can you give me your opinion of how they're doing? Just like an employee that you're getting ready to handle or onboard, you want their references. You can do the same thing with your accounting professional and that scope. So whether it's outsourced or in office, you can ask for references. And you should, but you should really ask, are they working in, have they worked in, and do they know whatever industry you're in? Now, of course, we know that anybody can say anything that they think you want to hear, right? We've all heard it. Yeah, I specialize in da 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 da. And then you get in there and you're like, what? You didn't even know how. I am great at IT. I'm an IT professional, and they don't even know how to freaking turn on the computer or how to do Control Alt Delete or something. That is very real. And you can't help what people are going to say. But when you start to dig into that answer, you will quickly understand whether or not it was accurate. Next, we'll talk about types of transactions by the industry that you're in. If you are a dental practice, you'll have very specific types of transactions that are reoccurring in your business. You'll have very specific softwares that are used in your business. You'll have very specific types of way you need to record things. If you're a lawyer, there's very specific ways that you need to record things that for compliance you need to have on hand. If you're a restaurant, you need to understand restaurant purchases and costs and wages. If you're in construction or um, not project management, well, project management, but property management, excuse me, there's very specific reports and things you need to see for that business. So starting to ask questions that are just industry jargon that they should know if they in fact understand that industry is important to ask. What would you do if, for example, what would you do if we had an invoice that came in and on a project and a change order was needed or requested? How would you handle that in QuickBooks? You don't need to know what the steps are. You need to hear from them how they would answer it and that they can answer it. So then you're looking for, do they stumble? Do they hesitate? Do they ask you what a change order is? Do they say, oh, QuickBooks can't do that, without understanding that QuickBooks actually can do that in a certain subscription level? It does have a very specific way it does it, but do they even know that? Do they say to you, oh, that's not something we would handle in QuickBooks. We would take that to your third party project management solution, which they should know if they've done their due diligence with your company and understanding how you function. So you're just looking to see how they answer that question. Again, if you have an accounting professional or somebody in that industry that is familiar with all this on the call with you, they'll be able to also pick up on these answers and then report back. Yeah, when you asked them about change orders, they had no clue. That's probably not a good thing. And again, everybody starts somewhere, and you may be a newer company, a smaller company, and you may be okay with someone kind of learning on the job and not knowing everything they need to know to start. There is nothing wrong with that, but at least you absolutely know what you're getting when you first start process, instead of just believing that someone knows what they're doing and then finding out later over time, over trials and tribulations, over mistakes, over missed opportunities, and so on and so forth. Another thing you can, so ask them about what other softwares they've worked in for your industry. For example, how much have you worked in Clover? If you're a retail space, or if you're a cafe or a candy company or a coffee shop, oh, so what is your experience with Clover and QuickBooks, or Clover and Xero, or Clover and Zoho, or Clover and whatever platform you're in? Can you tell me a little bit about that? They should be able to, if that's what they do and they know what they're doing, just start talking about Clover and. You don't even need to know what they're actually saying. You need to understand that they can answer and they feel comfortable answering that question. All of this is ultimately important for you to know, because as the business owner, you should always know and be able to see what's going on in your books and your numbers, and kind of pick out like, oh, this doesn't look right, or that's not quite being done right. But you don't have to be proficient, because again, that's not your job. You're hiring somebody for that to be their job. Or you're scaling to a point where it no longer makes sense for you to keep spending your time doing this thing, because your time is better spent going out and finding more money, creating new things, inventing, running a business, scaling a business, hiring, firing, not doing bookkeeping and accounting. But you need that service to understand how to do all the other things I just said, right? So ask them what other softwares they work in that are pertinent or for your industry. It could be a project management software. It could be a retail software. It could be an inventory solution. It could be manufacturing. It could be construction specific. Whatever industry you're in, ask them that question. If they're like, oh, I've really worked in another platform, you now know that if you utilize another platform, if you need to utilize another platform, they have no experience with going back and forth with using the secondary platform to connect to QuickBooks. They also are not going to be technologically available to help you implement, to help you map, to help you integrate. They won't know because they've never done it. Again, nothing's wrong with that, and everybody starts somewhere, but you'll know that you're going to need to seek consultation to make sure that they know what they're doing in that platform with the accounting software. Because at the end of the day, the accounting software is Bible. The accounting software is your financials, is your business analytics, is your data, is your decision making. It's all there. So you need that platform to work well with it. So you have all the information in one place. Moving on from there, you ask them about payroll. Whether or not you have payroll right this second, you will eventually in business, if you're lucky enough to do this, you will eventually have payroll, even if it's just for yourself for compliance as an S corp officer. You have to put yourself on payroll. Therefore, that person will eventually have to see payroll coming through your business. One person, 10 people, 100 people, it doesn't matter. But what matters is, are they familiar with it? Do they know what they're doing in it? Do they know how to identify issues? Do they know how the payroll platform you're choosing works? Gusto, Paychex, ADP, Intuit. There's so many, Patriot is another one. There's so many options out there. So they may then tell you, oh no, I don't do payroll. I don't mess with payroll. I never touch payroll. Then you know they're not going to be the person that's going to be able to get in those books, rip it apart, identify problems, make sure it's compliant, educate themselves on the situation. Because when people say, oh, I don't touch that, that means specifically, I don't want to. I'm not going to do that. I'm not even charging for that service. Or they'll say, oh, yeah, I only use Gusto. I only use ADP. I only use Paychex. Those only answers are typically, not 100%, are typically because there is an accountant program that they're participating in where they get a kickback from the payroll company. I'm spilling the beans a bit, but I want you to understand exactly what's going on behind the scenes in all of these discussions. There's typically a kickback that's, for example, ADP has an accountant program. If I sign you up with ADP, ADP gives me your first 3 months worth of payroll fees as a commission. So they don't make a dime for 3 months if I sign you up. So a lot of people will sign up their customers on the basis of their commission, on the basis of, oh, this is the program I'm in, not on the basis of this is what's best for the customer. This is a good fit. This is what, looks right. That's the basis. There is nothing wrong with that. And all of us in business do things on the basis of how it is going to personally affect us. Not a bad thing. But you need to understand if they say, I only do that, there's a few reasons for that. Either they've had bad experiences with other platforms and they've landed on the one that gives them the least amount of resistance, or there's an incentive program for them. So they want all their customers on that, or they just only have ever worked in it. And so they don't know other ones and they're afraid to kind of branch out in case it's different. Personally, we are a QuickBooks Online only company. We have set our platform as we only do Intuit products, and that is why we only do QuickBooks Online payroll. I don't want to have to bounce from software to software to software to help a client when everything can be in one place and is easy to use and I understand the software. Does that mean that I will never take a client that uses ADP or Paychex or Gusto? No, it doesn't. It just means we only recommend QuickBooks Online. So that's a question you can ask them. Are you familiar with payroll? Do you do payroll? And what platforms do you use or have you used? Because then you'll understand if they're versed, if they get it, or if they can even really work in what you are wanting to work in. Can they recommend is a different question. Yes, I've worked in ADP. Yes, I've worked in Paychex. Yes, I've worked in Gusto. And yes, I've worked in QuickBooks Online. I can genuinely tell you that I've never had one of those solutions really be better than the other. Every single one has its quirks. Every single one has had technical challenges at one moment or another. Every single one is a different way of doing things. Every single one produces a paycheck at the end of the day for my clients. And every single one is relatively similarly priced. So then there's going to be that, oh, it's $5 extra here, $10 extra there, $2 less over here. And you have that conversation with them on their recommendations. If they are understanding payroll, or say that they are, I would ask them a qualifying question, because Over the years, I've seen so many people say they do payroll, but all they mean is I take a time card and I put it into the system, and whatever the system decides to do, I did payroll. What I understand payroll really means, do they know S Corp compliance? Do they know, understand reasonable compensation compliance on that? Do they know how to see and fix and tax issues? Do they know the agencies to call? Do they know how to set you up in multiple states? Are they willing to take the time to set you up in multiple states if you're a remote employer? This is all knowing payroll. Do they know the questions to ask? Do they understand employer taxes versus employee taxes? I just talked to someone the other day who did not realize that employers pay a certain tax. You may not even know that yourself as a new employer. You're leaning on their expertise to understand what you need to know. So if you ask them these types of questions, what would you do in this scenario? Let's just say you can say something like, I'm an S Corp officer. How would you make sure I'm paying myself enough and that I'm paying enough into taxes with my payroll? Shut up and let them answer. They're either going to say, oh, I would do the reasonable compensation analysis annually. We would do some tax planning and strategy to make sure that if you have to pay more than what your reasonable comp is in taxes, that you take care of that. They would say something like, oh, I would ask your tax preparer to review that with you, and then we would just make changes in your payroll account according to their plans. Not a wrong answer whatsoever if that's not their skill set. Or they would be like, I've never heard of reasonable. What's reasonable compensation? Do you know what your reasonable? They'll let you know that they don't know, or they'll look puzzled, or they'll look confused, or they'll put their head down. They'll give you signs of I don't know what they're talking about. So again, you don't even need to know what you're talking about. You need to see how they react. So asking them, how would you handle this situation, is a good clue. You could say another thing you could say is, we hire all across the country. So how do you go about making sure that we can hire in each individual state? Their answer should be, well, before you hire anybody, we need to make sure you're set up in that state with a withholding number and an unemployment number. And then we can hire and put them on payroll, and we need to update them in the system. Depending on what platform they're talking about, each system will have a little bit different way. But the fact that they would know how to answer that immediately, or like, I've never dealt with out of state employees, I've never dealt with, doing that. I just take the time cards and I put the information in. You'll start to see kind of their qualifiers, or if they can or cannot really do payroll. Payroll is one thing you don't want to screw up. You don't want to screw it up for you as the employer with the taxes and penalties and interest. You don't want to screw it up for your employees and the people that are counting on you to pay their bills and feed their kids. And you don't want to screw it up for compliance, which could lead to long-term effects and also tax effects down the line that's costing you more money. So that's really important for you to know if they know. So again, even if you're not doing payroll yet, you know that their ability to scale with you and grow with you or not. The next thing I would say to make sure you ask them is very specific questions around your day-to-day business. I usually get 10 to 12 bills in a month, and we don't really have a process in place to approve the bills, but I need to make sure that before anything's paid, I have eyes on it and I approve it. How would you do that? Just let them answer. They do not have to give you a step by step, but they should be able to have the conversation of, well, first we'll make sure when I get the bills in, we'll post them to QuickBooks. Maybe you and I can meet every Friday and we'll review the bills that are in place. And then once you approve me to pay the bill, we can go ahead and pay it. Something to that effect. Or they'll ask you, what is your SOP? How do you pay your bills now? They'll be wanting to get an understanding of what they're also getting into, because remember, they're also getting into something that they want to make sure they know and understand and can do. Nobody wants to fail or hate their job. So they may be coming back to you with, well, what is your process now? What are you doing now? And that's them thinking through how would this work then? How would I do it and follow their process? What would the step by step be? It's good if they're asking you those questions back because they're really wanting to understand your process and procedure customized to you, not just generic, right? So once you find out in this scenario, hey, um, this is a bill pay scenario, and they tell you their answer, great. How do you pay the bills? Just ask them, how do you pay the bills? They're going to say, well, I don't. You would pay the bills and I would just record it. Or they would say, oh, we go in and we pay everything through QuickBooks. Or we love bill.com or Mailio. And so that's the platform we do. Or they'll just say, no, no, you tell me what you want me to do and that's what I'll do. So that gives you kind of an idea of the fact that they're thinking ahead. They think through it. They know the systems. They understand the softwares, or they don't. If they're hesitant, that doesn't mean it's bad. It's just, again, expectation management for you to understand where they're at and that they know or they don't know. You may choose to go ahead and hire them on the basis that you can start them at the lower wage based on experience, and you can deduct that their experience is not vast because of how they've answered their questions. That's okay. And that is your decision as the business owner. But again, at least you know going in what you're getting. Finally, I would just ask them what types of industries they've worked in. Because I know we asked earlier, do you know this industry, the one you're in? But asking them what kinds of industries they've worked in will give you an insight of, do they bounce all over the place? Are they multifaceted? Are they able to handle all different types of transactions and spending, all different platforms, all different softwares? Or have they only ever worked in project management or construction, but you have a retail shop and you're not really wanting to bring on somebody that you have to train a whole new set of eyes for, because it is very different than what they've been in. You might have a couple businesses. So you might need somebody that understands property management versus construction versus a retail business versus a consulting business. That happens a lot where business owners, serial entrepreneurs, as we'll call them, have multiple different hands and pots. And that's not a bad thing. And you want to know, can one person understand all that's going on? Or do you need a different person for each set of books? And that's not a bad thing either. That's completely fine and honestly might be better for you because then your checks and balances aren't slipping through the cracks. So those are my tips. We're at our time today. I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any live. If there's not, whatever platform you're finding us on, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, please pop your questions in it with whatever chat or DM that you're in, and we'll be happy to answer them at a later date. We will see you again in 2 weeks for our next mini masterclass at 4 p.m. Pacific time. The second Tuesday. Oh my Lord, it's already May. Thursday. What am I saying? Second Thursday in May, for our next mini masterclass. We hope you all have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Thank you for joining or coming back and watching, and we'll see you all soon. Bye.